The hospital hallway smelled of antiseptic and faint perfume from visitors passing by. The man paced up and down the cold floor, his hands clasped together tightly. His heart was pounding faster than it ever had before. He had dreamed of this moment for months, waiting to finally hold his child. But now that it was here, the minutes felt like hours. Every time the door to the delivery room swung open, he turned quickly, hoping it would be the nurse calling him in. He thought of his wife, lying in there, struggling and pushing through the pain. He wished he could take some of it away, but all he could do was wait. He remembered the first time she told him she was pregnant, how her eyes had lit up, how she placed his hand gently on her stomach weeks later to feel the small flutter. They had laughed, cried, and prepared for this moment together. And now it was finally happening. After what felt like forever, the sound of a baby's cry pierced through the walls. His breath caught. That was his child, the sound he had imagined but never really understood until now. A nurse came out a few minutes later, smiling warmly, and told him he could come inside. His legs felt heavy as he followed her in. The room was filled with soft cries, the sound of monitors, and the deep breaths of his exhausted wife. She looked pale but radiant at the same time, her hair sticking to her forehead, her eyes watery yet full of relief. Beside her, wrapped in a small white blanket, was their baby boy. The nurse placed the baby gently in his arms. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The tiny fingers curled slightly, the face scrunched up, the cries softening as he held him close. The man felt his chest swell with emotion, joy, love, fear, all mixing together in ways he had never experienced. But then his eyes focused, and suddenly his heart skipped a beat. The baby's skin color looked different than he expected. It wasn't the rosy pink shade he had seen in pictures of newborns. It was darker, unusual, and it made him freeze. His smile faltered. A cold wave of fear rushed through his body. He looked at the baby again, his hands trembling slightly. His mind tried to make sense of it. Was something wrong with the baby's health? Was this normal for newborns? Or was it something else? He couldn't help the thoughts that flooded him, the doubts, the questions he had never imagined he would ask himself on this day. He looked at his wife, who was gazing at the baby with a tired but peaceful smile. She didn't seem worried. To her, everything looked normal, everything looked perfect. But to him, something felt off. He felt guilty for even thinking it, but he couldn't silence the storm rising inside his chest. He pressed the baby closer, as if holding him tighter would push away his confusion. Yet his eyes kept returning to the color of his son's skin. He swallowed hard, glancing at the nurse as she adjusted the monitors. She didn't seem alarmed at all, which only deepened his confusion. If there was nothing wrong, then why did it feel so strange to him? Minutes passed, but they felt like hours. The man couldn't focus on anything else. His wife reached out weakly, her fingers brushing his arm. "Isn't he beautiful?" She whispered, her voice soft and filled with love. He forced a smile. Nodding quickly, but inside his chest, his heart pounded louder and louder. He wanted to say yes, to agree with her, to let his joy take over. But fear held his tongue. His lips felt heavy, his throat dry. He could not bring himself to ask the question burning in his mind, not yet. The baby shifted slightly in his arms, his tiny face relaxing as though comforted by his father's touch. For a moment, the man's heart softened. This was his son, fragile, innocent, completely dependent on him. And yet the fear lingered like a shadow he could not escape as he stood there. Staring down at his child, he knew this day was supposed to be the happiest of his life. But instead of pure joy, it had given him a mixture of wonder and dread. He kissed the baby's forehead gently, trying to convince himself everything was fine, but deep down, he knew he could not ignore what he had seen. His wife, watching him closely, noticed the change in his expression. She knew him too well. She could see the questions in his eyes, even though he hadn't spoken them aloud. She sighed softly, almost as if she had been expecting this moment. The man didn't say anything yet. He couldn't. The weight of the thought was too heavy, and his mind was too clouded. For now, he just stood there in silence, holding his child close, while the unspoken question grew louder and louder in his heart. He didn't know it yet, but the answer to that question was going to come soon. And when it did, it would shake him, surprise him, and change the way he looked at his family forever. The man held his newborn son close, but his mind refused to rest. His heart should have been bursting with joy, but instead it was trapped in a storm of questions. The tiny baby was calm now, his cries softened into faint whimpers, his little fingers clutching the blanket. But the man's eyes kept returning to the child's skin color. Every time he looked, the uneasiness grew. He had seen babies before, pink and soft, their skin bright with new life. His son looked different. The color seemed darker, unusual, almost as if it carried a secret he didn't understand. Fear tightened his chest, making his breaths shallow. He tried to push the thought away. He told himself, maybe it's normal, maybe all babies look different when they're just born. But no matter how hard he tried, the doubt returned like a shadow. He glanced toward the nurse, hoping she might explain. But she moved around the room calmly, writing notes and adjusting equipment, as if nothing at all was strange. That made his fear worse. If no one else noticed, then was it just him? Or was there something more hidden behind this? His throat felt dry. He wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come out. What if his wife heard? What if his question hurt her? His wife was lying in bed, weak from the delivery, but her eyes glowed with love. She looked at the baby the way only a mother could, full of warmth, pride, and unshakable tenderness. She whispered, "He's perfect," and reached out her arms, asking to hold the child. The man handed the baby over gently, but inside, he felt torn apart. He saw her smile, her face lighting up despite her exhaustion, and for a moment, he envied her calmness. Why couldn't he feel that same peace? Why was he drowning in suspicion and fear instead of joy? As his wife cradled the baby against her chest, humming softly, the man's thoughts ran wild. He remembered the faces of his own parents, his family, his ancestors. Their skin tones, their features, they didn't match what he saw now. His mind began to whisper dangerous questions. He hated himself for even thinking them, but once they began, he couldn't silence them. Is this really my child? The thought sent a chill through his veins. He clenched his fists, ashamed. This was supposed to be the happiest moment of his life, but instead, doubt was poisoning it. He stole another glance at his wife. She looked so content, so lost in the wonder of holding their son. Could she see what he saw? Or was she hiding something from him? His chest tightened more with every passing minute. The room seemed smaller, the walls pressing in. He could hear the faint beeping of a machine nearby, the squeak of shoes on the hospital floor. But his mind was too loud to focus on anything else. He thought about the promises they had made to each other, the trust, the dreams, the years they had shared. Could it all be shaken in a single moment, by a single doubt? His heart told him to trust her. But his eyes and his fear whispered something else. The baby stirred and let out a small cry, pulling his attention back. The sound pierced his chest like a blade and a bomb at the same time. He wanted to protect this child, to love him with all his heart. Yet his fear was pulling him in another direction. He rubbed his face with his hands, trying to clear his head. He couldn't hold it in forever. The question was eating him alive. His lips trembled as he thought about speaking, about asking his wife why their son looked this way. But the words felt heavy, cruel even, in the quiet room filled with her joy. Still, the fear wouldn't let him rest. His mind spun with possibilities, medical conditions, hidden truths, betrayals. He didn't know what was real anymore. All he knew was that his heart was racing, his palms were sweating, and the silence between him and his wife was becoming unbearable. She must have sensed it. She always could read his moods. Slowly, she lifted her eyes from the baby and looked at him. Her gaze lingered, questioning, almost as if she already knew what was burning inside him. The man turned away for a moment, unable to meet her eyes. He felt both weak and angry at himself. He loved her, he trusted her, or at least he thought he did. But right now, fear was louder than love. And doubt was stronger than trust. He stood by the window, staring at the lights of the city outside. But his thoughts never left the tiny child now sleeping peacefully in her arms. He pressed a hand to the glass, cold against his skin, and wondered how a moment meant to bring happiness had turned into something so heavy. Finally, he drew in a shaky breath. He knew he couldn't stay silent much longer. The question inside him was too loud, too sharp. If he didn't ask it, it would tear him apart. But he also knew that once he spoke, nothing would be the same again. And so he waited, his heart pounding, his mouth dry, as his wife continued to hum softly to their child. The moment of confrontation was coming. The silence between them was no longer gentle, it was filled with tension. One question hung in the air, unspoken but ready to break everything open.